Can't hear you, Katie.
How about now?
That's better.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm the president and CEO of Tsunami. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are kicking off a new series.
Can you speak up a little, or something's wrong with the sound, Katie?
How's that? Is that better? Yeah. Now you just have to deal with the reality of working from home with my dog. Thanks, everyone. I do a lot of video conferences, and the joke is often that really I work for Bear, the dog, who just wants to go in and out all day long. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We're kicking off a new series today with an interesting and timely topic. I want to introduce our two facilitators. Jessica Altfilish is from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, with Harmony Cedar Rapids. And Ann Henry is with Soundscapes in Newport News, Virginia. This group was a group called Growing New and Emerging Organizations, and we were finding that really those conversations were much more open and interesting when all levels of organizations were able to participate and share. So we wanted to really transition that more narrow focus into just a broader open conversation among program leaders and directors, and we'll be doing this the third Friday of every month. We're going to call it Third Friday Forums, and we will have different topics for each month. And the idea is really to just have it be much like executive directors groups when they get together, or other leadership groups, that you bring your topic or you send to the facilitators in advance an idea that you'd like to think about in that theme for that month, and it's an open discussion. Our other working groups are available online. We've got the schedule for now through the rest of this semester. Those will be more presentation style, where we'll have leaders and speakers and have experts in the field offer advice and training around our different topic areas. But the Third Friday forums are really designed to be conversation-based. For this forum, we have a bit more content prepared to help lead the discussion in light of everything that has occurred with COVID-19, and we wanted to be able to prepare both ourselves and our field for fundraising in this particularly stressful and time of crisis. Jessica and Ann, do you want to introduce yourselves and just say a little bit about what you hope to accomplish with these Third Friday forums?
Sure. So I'm Jessica Altfilish, as Katie mentioned. Thanks, Katie. And I am from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'm the director of the Harmony School of Music, which is the first El Sistema-inspired program here in Iowa. The original intent of this was more as a support working group for small emerging organizations, but we've realized that we can get a lot more people in on a conversation with open dialogue, exchanging of ideas, if we expanded it to more of a forum to include all sizes of organizations. So that is where the Third Friday Forum has come from. Ironically enough, fundraising was the original first topic, but I think the focus of this conversation is certainly going to trend towards COVID-19, how it's affecting our communities, and what that means for our organizations and our funding models, our budgets, and how we approach fundraising and philanthropy. Anne, are you here? I'm looking through the participant list. I don't see Ann Henry on here yet. I believe Ann Henry from Soundscapes in Newport News will be here with their development director to also join the conversation. Ah, there's Carol. Hi, Carol. We're just doing introductions right now. So before we really get too far into this conversation, I know there are at least 1 or 2 members here who have never done a Zoom meeting before. So just a quick run through of some of the features. You should be able to see yourself. You should be able to see other participants. If you go down towards the bottom of the screen, you have the option to mute your microphone or turn off your video. Just to reduce background noise, if everybody could please make sure that their microphones are muted unless they are speaking, that would be really helpful for all of us. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll also see a chat button. So what we're going to do is during the presentations, if you have any questions that come up in the moment or at the end when we're doing more of a question and answer session, we're going to ask that everybody put their questions into the chat box. So when you want to make a comment or add something to the conversation or ask a question, just click on chat and then make sure that it's set to address the group. Or if you want to just address myself or Anne or Katie, that's fine too. But go ahead and type your question into the chat box. Is anyone having any technical difficulties? Can everyone hear me? Everyone see? Okay, I'm not hearing any objections, so we should be good to go. Okay, so today we have a few things that are going to be presented. First of all, Katie, the Executive Director of Elsa STEMA USA, is going to share with us a slide presentation from Bloomerang and also talk a little bit about that organization and resource. Then she will cover the Elsa STEMA USA checklist adapted from another organization. Then following that, we'll have a presentation, just a talk about what the Longy School of Music of the Bard College is doing to address fundraising and how they are preparing their Ungala event. And I think we will just go from there. So before I get too much, did Anne make it on the call? Is she here? I don't think so. Okay, sorry, Katie, go ahead.
Great. I just want to share, this is taken from a resource called Bloomerang. I'll type it into the chat box at the end of the presentation. Bloomerang is a software program for fundraising. They also do a lot of professional development in fundraising. And this has been a slide presentation that's been kind of widely shared among fundraisers in the nonprofit world across the country. And it's funny, and I thought it would be a great way for us to think about sharing information about fundraising for this year in light of COVID-19. So here's COVID-19 and your cause, how not to make it worse. Just as a reminder to everyone, we work in the best industry in the world. We get to work with hearts and minds and follow our passion and our dream. And so the idea behind this is to really try to stay inspired in the work that you are doing. This is really Bloomerang's background in developing its own product and resources. So it has truly had a life in fundraising. We're going to jump through these slides, some great cheat sheets for you to access if you're interested. But the most important thing to remember is to keep calm and don't stop, that there's no doubt that the coronavirus is going to impact our cause, but we've got to keep moving forward. Take it seriously, don't panic. I think our Elsa STEMA community, I have seen the way Nucleos have come together to both provide information in their communities around health concerns and practical steps forward for their schools, as well as taking care of their own internal staff, has just been remarkable. I'm so proud to be part of this community. But one of the things we want to think about in fundraising, that this isn't a normal situation. And so we're going to talk a lot today about communication. So you've got to be communicating with your staff, your donors, and your beneficiaries. This is a not normal crisis, so this is a new kind of financial crisis. It's not a natural disaster. It's not a, it is a worldwide pandemic, which is something the nonprofit world has not seen. So no one really knows what will happen with fundraising, but it is easy to make this worse if we panic. And we know if one sure way to make things worse is to cut fundraising and to delay your appeals. And we've got to be thinking about the immediate direct revenue hits to our cause, and then long-term, how are we going to reposition and pivot the way that we're looking at both spending our funds towards supporting our organizations and also raising money to support them. So the big areas of disruption are in our case, event cancellations and economic problems, as individual giving is going to be significantly impacted. I'm so glad Mike Angel is with us. He and I spoke last week just about what foundations are thinking about and looking at this point in terms of giving. I'd love it for him to share. Thinking about internal vulnerability, just remember that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I found this presentation really kind of motivating and a way to think about keeping a positive face in light of what is going to be a really tough environment. But for sure, the only way to make it tougher is to not stay positive and to not continue asking for support. I didn't know this, but in 2004 in philanthropy, it was called the Tsunami suicide, where everyone felt like it just wasn't the right time to be asking for money, and therefore they cut their fundraising, and then their income was way, way down internationally in fundraising. So it wasn't something that had to happen for organizations. So what if we can imagine that whether the economy is up or down or the same, that our fundraising, we take the same approach. Always do brilliant fundraising. So the impact will vary upon our cause. I think that we will have a significant impact that our income will be down and we aren't on the front line, that ELSA Summit programs are largely organizations that are fundraising around our events in the community, our concerts, getting the kids out there in front of donors, having donors come to your sites and have that main face-to-face experience and really understand what's going on in your programs on that visceral level in a personal way. We've got to really be thinking about how to reimagine that and share that same communication and feeling in a virtual environment, over the next 6 months and perhaps into the rest of this year. So we can't control COVID-19, but we can control what we do next. I don't think that this is our area of impact. We're going to jump through. These are slides based towards organizations who are more centered around health and food and basic needs for humans, but this is us, but our income is down, but we're not on the front line of COVID-19. So it's essentially an existential threat for many charities. Can people take part in your program from their homes? Can you share something about your program from your home? We need to be bringing online whatever we can, wherever possible. So I've seen some really interesting online classes that programs are creating, or they're making videos. I shared on social media yesterday a video from the Washington Heights Charter School in New York City, where they had interviews and just a brief hello from each of their teachers, and they did it from the school so that kids could see their school and their teachers and just a word of hello from them. And it really created this sense of, we're here for you, we're the same people, we're devoted to this community and we want to share with you what's going on and what our plans are for the next couple of months. Making sure that you're sharing that information with your donors or involving your donors are in the creation of videos like that, thinking about how to invite new donors and attract new support to your organization through an online community. So bringing online your programming wherever possible, and then also planning a crisis appeal campaign. We've put together some sample language in the toolkit around a crisis appeal campaign and how you can position your organization as part of the larger national El Sistema movement and how the field is responding to this crisis. So we'll share with you some of that sample language. Here are some examples of saving your event income to take an example from a sleep out in a homeless shelter. We're also going to hear an example from Longy's recent gala. They've closed up their ungala, which they took online, and they had some great suggestions for how to plan an online event. So in this case, they asked everyone to sleep out, to take their sleeping bags and sleep out on their balconies. So taking the concept of a sleep out, where if you're not familiar with this concept, people and rallying around homeless shelters commit to sleeping outside on the street for several days at a time, and they do it all in a group, and it's an event, it's all coordinated and supported in a central location. But in this case, they took that same concept and asked people to sleep out in their own backyards. And they did it all together, all on the same day. They took photos, they shared it to social media, they took pledges from people as they were sending photos and messages from their phones. So they created, in this case, they created a same time, same space, essentially same virtual space event, and raised money in that way. If you're in a crisis appeal time, if your finances are being stretched, you've got to tell your donors, tell people what you're facing, what your ideas were for this year, that you have teachers who you were expecting to pay X amount by the end of this year, and that in order to continue supporting them, that's where we need to be, where we need to maintain our fundraising goals. If your income is coming down, and this idea of new events or being able to promote your organization out in the community, that both are coming down, use both angles. So to be able to say, you know, we're not able to have our events, we had to cancel X, Y, or Z concerts. Here's what the concerts were. Here's what their focuses were going to be. Here's how much we hope to raise at these events. And if you're expecting your income to come down, be sure to use both angles in telling your crisis campaign story. And then I thought this was a great idea. Now is a great time to launch a monthly campaign. So to be able to move your individual donors to monthly giving. And in moves management, that's usually asking them to just take a step up that is reasonable for them, so that if they were giving $100 a year, it would be very reasonable to ask them to give $10 a month, and then that bumps them up to $120 per year. So you want to be thinking about, in both mass emails and mass mailings, and then phone calls and video conferences to your major donors, can you ask them to give more now through a monthly giving approach? Be very aware of your reserves if you have any, or at least very aware of your financial position, and be ready for questions from high value donors. We've been going through this with El Sistema USA. I've done a lot over the last couple of months to just be over the top transparent about where we are financially, where I hope we will be by the end of this year, what it's going to take between now and then in order to get there, and then our plans for the future. And for high-level donors, you just want to be able to be really fluid in your financials to have that conversation. We're going to I'm going to jump out of these slides now and go to our toolkit that we put together. So I took this from something that is also being widely shared, and I thought it was a good example for us. The network fundraising services supports Feeding America and all of the food banks across the country. And I thought, as El Sistema USA, with all of our El Sistema Núcleos across the country, that this would relate. And a lot of the language is really helpful, and I've altered it to make it applicable to us. So I'll be sharing the toolkit online, and also I'm happy to email it out directly to this group, but you'll also be able to download it online. We have the El Sistema USA. Before I start the toolkit, I'll just make sure everybody knows about this. We have our research page. We've created a COVID-19 resource page on our website, and I've been updating this almost daily with just additional links, new news. When we update it, I send out that it's happening through social media. We've been adding different links to different webinars. This is the note from our meeting on this Monday, where groups came together to just talk about what they're planning to do with their teachers, with their students, as they attempt to move their classes online. We've got some really amazing partnerships with online music education software companies. Noteflight is a fantastic one. Noteflight is generally repertoire, and it's an interesting one where kids can sight read and compose repertoire and upload videos of themselves playing. And then Picardy is more of a music theory program. And Sight Reading Factory is a really cool program where it's similar to Noteflight, but you just have these sight reading exercises for your students. So I'm going to move back to the toolkit, but just so everyone knows, check out that page every day, every other day. There's new resources there often. So we're going to go through this toolkit. We're going to start with best practices, and then I've got a fundraising team checklist. With small organizations like El Sistema USA programs, your whole staff is your fundraising team. So your staff, your board is your fundraising team. So really, I would start by letting them know that you attended this webinar, that you're making plans for the rest of this year, that help make them aware that they are the fundraising team, that at this point between now and the end of the year, we're all members of the fundraising team, just trying to sustain our organization. So within the team, all of our El Sistema USA members, I would like everyone to be able to have these things in place, which are making sure that even on your site, I know that there's an influx of information on the internet now about COVID-19, but making sure that you've got a link on your site to the CDC, and just having a place for if parents, if teachers, if anyone in your community is passing by, essentially, or seeking out information about you and your program, that you've also got a link to the CDC and what's going on around the virus. And then adding templates. So we'll have talking points for your relationship managers. Now's a good time, if you haven't done this before, to assign relationship managers. It's going to be really hard for you to do it all. I recommend coming up with a list of your major donors and segmenting them, and then working with you and your board of directors to essentially assign people to a segment of your donation population. That can be by amount. I'd say it most often works best by relationship. So if you've got teachers who have met some of your donors before and they've developed a relationship over time, now would be a great time to tap them and to say, I really need you to help me keep this person informed around what we're doing on the ground with our El Sistema program going online. And we're going to talk about events, and we're going to talk about how board members can engage. So the guiding principles of this fundraising plan, first and foremost, is the importance of communication. We're all in this crisis together. Transparent and consistent communication is key. I think it's easy to remember to communicate with your staff first, to make sure they know what's going on and that they're clued into plans for the program. I think it's easy to forget to also let your donors know that you're doing that. So just remember to always think full circle about your communication. Now is the time. We've talked about don't abandon your fundraising plan, but think about how to take that plan online at this point. Using our unique voice, now is the moment more than ever when music is so important to keep positivity in our lives. Jessica said this when we were preparing for this call, which is that it's got to be more than about survival. We want to be able to maintain beauty in the home. We want to be able to maintain art making in the home, and thinking about how to help our families remain connected to the reason they started with your El Sistema program in the first place, which was their love of their kids and their love of their, falling in love with this idea of what music could do for them and their family. Be sure to leverage technology. There are lots of great resources around how to reach people where they are in terms of technology, be it on their phones or their tablets. So I just encourage you to look at some of those resources. We have them available on our site. They're available online as well. I loved this, practicing empathy. This is the first time for everyone. So I think that you should really be thinking about realistic goals around fundraising at this point and help put wins in place for everyone. And that could be on a monthly basis, a weekly basis, and for sure thinking about what would be a win for you at the end of this fiscal year. So here's our fundraising checklist. So really helpful for you to have draft language. We've got some samples for you to share, but you'll want to personalize that for your organization. You want to identify a communication protocol to activate the crisis language versus regular language. I think we've hit, my opinion is that we've hit that point. You will have to assess in every community where you are, but at this point, I would be raising the flag of we're going to be facing some serious economic trouble. We don't expect that we'll be able to raise money in the same way that we have been able to in the past. Now is when we need you more than ever. Talking about pivoting from any upcoming events, making sure that you've got both a frequency and a schedule of your messaging, and that your team and staff knows what the message is, having clarity around what that message is going to be. We've got some sample messages for you. I would really be thoughtful in articulating what is going to be most powerful for you and your community. Now would be a great time. We've talked a lot about community engagement and community events and how to stay connected to your community. That would be an awesome time to launch a virtual food drive or a Facebook fundraiser to help ease giving, not just for your program, but in partnership with other community partners, so that donors are able to see, yes, you're in it to support your own kids and your own families, but you're also here as a fabric of the community, and you want to be giving back. And creating your own COVID-19 landing page on your own website, which you would update regularly, and it could include how people can receive help, how people can provide help to your organization, your response to the outbreak, and links to those trusted sources like the CDC. Here's some sample language for you to use. Your member name, we're carefully monitoring the development. You're partnering with El Sistema USA, which is a broader network of an El Sistema movement. You're in close communication with your school and community partners and are assessing and adapting to meet the evolving needs of your El Sistema community. You want to continue providing music instruction and creating beauty at home instead of together in our classrooms. If you want to help support that, please donate here. Add specific examples of what you're doing to support your program. Remind everyone that you're super grateful for their support and that we know that you are experiencing this alongside us. This is a worldwide event. And at this point, we are encouraging donations to help meet the evolving need. I've included a sample fundraising email. The hard option subject line is "we need your help." And the softer option is, Soundscape or Cedar Rapids, Harmony Cedar Rapids is preparing to meet the evolving need of the community. And then there's a sample email there for you. And then we've got a list of how board members can engage, leveraging their own social media channels to raise awareness, making an additional gift or securing a challenge gift at this time as you launch your crisis campaign, motivating your company to make a cash gift, talk about employee giving potential campaign, directing those in your sphere of influence to make a gift, reaching out to trade organizations to be able to amplify this message, hosting a virtual fund drive, your own personal fund drive to support the Systema program, and volunteering to support in fundraising roles within the organization. And also, of course, always a good one, which is to have board members thanking donors at this crazy, crazy time. That's it from El Sistema USA. I hope that both the slide points and the toolkit will be helpful. I want to turn it over to our friends from the Longy School of Music. They have a really neat example to share in their Ungala that they just put on.
Well, thank you. So Hannah and I can introduce ourselves. I'll just jump in and say I'm Ann Welch. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Longy. I've been at Longy for about 6 years. I was doing fundraising for about 5 years before that as a consultant and also in-house. So I actually started my fundraising career just as the stock market crashed in 2008, which was in some ways remarkably similar to what we're going through in philanthropy right now. So I think that's also been interesting to see how what we were doing then can inform how we behave today. So Hannah's really the genius behind our Ungala. So I'm just going to be here as like background commentary if she needs me, but she's really the star of the show here.
Thank you, Anne. Hi all, I'm Hannah Gruby. I'm the Assistant Director of Development and Events at Longy School of Music of Bard College. So thank you so much for having us today. We're here to tell you about how we had to switch gears for our annual gala celebration in light of a cancellation and how we have experienced success since then. So our gala was going to happen at Sanders Theater and Annenberg Hall. We were expecting to welcome 400 guests for dinner and about 150 more people to come to the concert as well in Sanders Theater. But I got an email from Harvard on Friday, March 7, that they were canceling all non-essential events at Sanders and Annenberg. So on Saturday morning, we all gathered with the Office of the President and other development team members and other key staff to kind of decide where to go from there. It was a tricky time because even though it was a week out and we realized a lot of our partners didn't have that much time to deal with a cancellation, things were changing so fluidly and so quickly that there wasn't a clear kind of plan B that made the most sense immediately. So it was a great opportunity to have a conversation about what we wanted to do. We decided that trying to move the venue but keep the same date was tricky because it wouldn't provide the same quality of the event that's so important to us. And then rescheduling for a later time just made us nervous because if we were to reschedule in the case that we would have to reschedule again, we just didn't want to mix those messages. We wanted to be as clear as possible and simplify. So after some conversation, we decided to cancel the in-person event altogether and move forward with a virtual Ungala. We're focusing on our fundraising efforts online. So in a way, we were also kind of lucky because the cancellation came from the venue. So that narrowed our options for the next steps. And the bulk of our expenses were the rentals and catering associated with Harvard. So those were automatically canceled. With this and other canceled costs, such as like decor and printing, we ended up paying only about 20% of our original expenses, which is crucial for how we were able to define success for this event. Another critically important key to the success of this effort is that we've had this year-long fundraising effort to back us up. The biggest gifts we were expecting from the gala were largely already pledged, if not paid. This also speaks to the importance of that development cycle and maintaining those donor relationships, because we were able to fall back on most of those funds already in hand, which was also really important. So in discussing how to make our virtual Ungala as compelling a fundraiser as possible, we used really clear, action-oriented messaging, and that was key. We've decided as a team, like, that's really what helped us. Because in the live event, our guests could see the programs in action, including our Systema side-by-side program. This year, we were going to include a lot more other musicians, including faculty, conservatory students. We were really excited about this concert. And we know that our guests, when they're in the event, they can see that, and that drives the inspiration to give and to support those programs. So we realized that our programs are essential in the messaging. So we created this program first approach in the online environment. So it had to be visual and compelling to make the audience feel like they were experiencing the programs before we asked them to make a donation. We also had a lot of collateral put together already, including videos that have been already produced, a lot of archival footage, but also compelling message-driven videos about our programs. And the messaging from those videos were really clear. They were compelling testimonials by people who were in the program and people who were impacted by the program. So the critical point of this was we were showing and not telling about how important our programs are at Lungi. We sent an email a day, basically, for about a week. The first one being a cancellation message to our whole list. And I don't know, Katie, if you had time to add that to the slide, but I think it was a really good pairing of messages of we are canceled, but the programs still continue, so we need your help. But I could also try to show that to you if you want. What do you think, Katie?
I have made you a co-host, so you can share your screen.
Okay, well, let me grab that then. Well, why don't I show you the most recent PDF I sent you, Kate, would be the best thing. But in the meantime, folks, I can show you my the gala website. We kind of redesigned it to reflect that it was a virtual Ungala. And let's see. Can you see that?
Yep.
Great. So we reconfigured our landing page. First of all, literally changed the URL so it says Ungala. And we had messaging up here. This has changed over time because we have a lot of messages that we added on with a lot of videos. But basically, the top said, you know, the in-person event is canceled, but now we're virtual, with gigantic buttons to give. And they looked like this when you opened the donation page. So we did use a thermometer to kind of track the progress. And we had compelling messages of which, what levels, what kind of impact the gift would have at each level. And we even had a lot of peer-to-peer fundraising that also worked out pretty well. So that was all here and interactive. So.
I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Would you talk a little bit about your goal and how you did fundraising offline in order to get where you arrived?
Yeah, of course. So all of the messages we sent via social media, via email, had that program-driven messaging, like I said. And so it was, here's a program that's really important to Lungi. Here's how you can help make a donation to, you know, help these students change the world through music. A lot of messaging like that. So each email that we sent every day had a message about how the donations were important to sustain the programs. And also the social media posts were all videos, actually. Some of them spoke directly to the importance of support from the community. And some of them we kind of had the text kind of introduced, like, here's an important program and here's why you need to donate. We also had a telethon effort that was kind of simultaneous with these online efforts and emails. Lungi has this wonderful graduate fellow program where we have conservatory students who work with us in the office. So we had our graduate fellows making personal outreach calls to donors from last year and the year before who we know were inspired by the programs at Longy, especially at the gala. So the graduate fellows reached out to them and said, thank you so much for your support. We need it now more than ever. Would you please consider renewing or increasing? And actually we found that the messaging to those donors was crucial as a personal touch. Some of them just wanted to talk to a human, to kind of like talk through like, how's Longy doing? And so we were able to say like, we're doing all right, but we could really use your help. And then the messages throughout the course of the email campaign were pretty consistent. They didn't change that much because they were telling us telling the donors how their gift supports the programs that change lives. So each communication gave a compelling personal example of how we do that with those videos.
Awesome, thank you. Sarah Zanussi asked if you would share the script for the telecalls. That would be awesome.
Sure.
Thank you. Jessica and Carol, I think we'd love to kick it over to you at this point. We were going to wrap up. We did break this meeting into two parts. So we were looking at the first hour or so of this meeting being for organizations with budgets of $250,000 or less, and then we'll move into organizations with budgets of $251,000 or more. Beyond sharing the script, Jessica and Anne, do you have any questions or ideas that have come up for you? Sorry, I keep saying Anne, Carol, or ideas that have come up for you in our presentations or in the lessons learned from Longy's gala, and then now to the group would be a good time to ask any questions.
Okay, actually, Carol and Anne and I were just talking about what we'll have everybody do. We're going to do a maybe, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe 20, we'll see what we need, minute session for questions and answers for a little bit more of a larger discussion among everybody on the call. So the way we're going to manage this is if you have a question, if you could click on that chat icon at the bottom of your screen and then type your question into the chat box. Then I'll go ahead and take those questions and read them out, or I guess if somebody wants to take a look at the messenger, you can, and then raise your hand. Does everybody see the raise your hand icon? There's a little blue hand that you click on, and if you would like to answer that question or speak to something, perhaps an idea that hit you in the presentation today, or something that your program is doing or would be able to do, then that you would like to share, then tap on that hand to speak. Okay. Sarah, oh, Sarah, I'm going to totally butcher your last name, so I'm not even going to try it. Says that she's struggling with the don't change your strategy. Sarah, you said something about wanting to, do you want to go ahead and speak on that?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm calling from Minnesota, and I am really proud. This was the first year we really worked on the connect, cultivate before we engage people rather than flat out reaching to engage. And so we were going to have something on April 5th by those of you who know Libby Larson. She's a pretty famous composer, and she's from Minnesota. And we were going to have a salon party at her house. And so it was going to be a lot of her friends and a lot of pretty high profile people in the Twin Cities. And it's taken us, 5.5 years to even get this connection. So it was just really sad to have to cancel. And I'm struggling because I don't have their emails. I only have their snail mail. So I've been trying to email through other people to tell people that the event is canceled. I've been trying to think, is there a way to do it virtually? But unless they opt in to having our emails, I don't even have their emails. Obviously, trying to do a snail mail mailing right now is really tough. So I guess if any of you had any thoughts on, do we just not try to connect people right now and really focus on our loyal people? Some of those have already given in December their big gift, and so it will be hard to ask them for June, but our plan was to have this event on April 5th, invite them to an open rehearsal sometime in the month of April if they wanted to, and then come to our final concert May 19th. so that by the time they received our end of year appeal, it would be the fourth touch point and it would feel very appropriate to ask them for a significant gift. Now it feels a little weird to be like, hey, the event is canceled, but you can donate to us anyway. And having to do that through snail mail and the amount of staff time and capacity that takes. So I would love to just hear a little bit of that, because we've been really trying to focus on building our base this year rather than just engaging the same 100 people over and over again. And I can't think of how to do that virtually when you don't have a relationship already.
Yeah, if I can jump in there, I mean, it's so hard, right? I mean, when you feel like, you have to put everything on a back burner and figure out a totally new way of operating and connecting with your donors. I mean, I think the first thing I would say is, if you're not asking, someone else is. So don't be afraid to be asking, because by not asking, it's just like what Katie was sharing in the presentation. You won't be raising the money. So I think a lot of it comes down to, how do we create authentic connections with our donors however we can. And so there's always like that prospecting roadmap that we do in fundraising with this. You just start with who you know, and then you just work the circles outwards. So I guess my first step would be to say, can you start with who you do have a connection to, who you do have emails with, and just start building almost like a team of people who can help you do the outreach, and start being direct connectors that will, get those people who you don't have the emails for connected to you directly. Because chances are, if they were going to come to your event, they're curious about what you're doing and they are interested. They've shown some level of interest. So how can you capitalize on that and build a direct relationship with them?
And would you recommend, so I've tried to ask for emails, and of course it's like, I'm too busy with work or I'm too swamped to compile an email list, is what Libby said, which I totally get. But, she's willing, she said she's happy to postpone the event so that it will happen at some point in the future. So would you recommend, like, if some of these people have, I would say it's more like they're in the same circle, but they're not necessarily buddy.
Right.
Would you just have them call them on your behalf? Because then you're asking someone, one of these people is an advisory board member, but would you have an ask over the phone? And then, this list was 200 people long. So.
Well, so could she send an email on your behalf that provides instructions on how to get in touch with you? Because then she's just sending one big email if she doesn't feel like she's comfortable putting together a massive list. I guess one of the things that we always work with when we're managing volunteers, especially ones that we know are like the kind of bigger fish, big name kind of people, is like, they don't have a lot of time. So how can we make it really easy for them to do something that will be really helpful for us? So drafting that email communication, providing, as much support as you possibly can, and just like taking all of the work off her shoulders, almost so that she only has to hit send.
So what we did is I made a draft email saying the event was canceled, and then I attached a contact card so that they could respond to that with all of their information if they so desired, and then sent that through another organization that is a lot of these supporters. That's how we got their names. Mm-hmm. So it just feels weird. Like, I don't even have your email and I'm including a donate link, but maybe I'm just being fearful. I don't know.
Yeah, I think part of it is like, you want to be able to capitalize on the fact that they've expressed interest. So you want them to keep in touch, because you want to inspire them to want to hear more. So in the communication that you send out that says, send me your email address essentially and come and support us, it's also saying, well, providing some sort of hint about what a next step with you would be. So why do I want to get your next email? Like, what's the news that you're going to be sending that will be compelling for me to want to get that email and therefore give you my email address?
And would you
Sarah, I'm so sorry to cut you off. I feel like I hate interrupting people. But I think that learning how to like language and to use with donors, and then how to pivot, is a really fabulous conversation. But we also need to make some time for some additional comments that are coming through in the chat box. So Hannah and Anne and Sarah, I think we're going to release some kind of like contact information document. Maybe this is a conversation we can continue. Then we have another question here from Armand Hall, and he's asking if anyone has ideas about how to navigate and nurture corporate sponsorships during this time, not just the individual sponsorships and donors. Does anyone have any response to that?
Yeah, I had some thoughts that I think might be helpful. I'm Carol Minter. I'm the development director at Soundscapes. And actually, I think some of what I wanted to share in response to that really applies to Sarah's question as well, which I think under typical circumstances, when I'm trying to foster relationships with a corporate donor and also with new donors, which is I really think what Sarah was talking about, there's a certain process that we all, those of us who are in the fundraising world know how to follow. You don't ask right away. You try to cultivate those relationships. A lot of times those first connections need to be an in-person conversation, which I understand when Sarah is asking about how do I keep moving if I just feel stymied in this, and the question that we just got about corporate and corporate sponsorships particularly, that's always my first step in a new corporate partnership relationship is I set up an in-person meeting and I come to their office and I bring pictures and videos to show them what we're doing at Soundscapes. That is always my first step. And I think something that I've really been giving thought to this week is that if this really does become our new normal for a time, it's not going to be okay to just sit back and wait until things are normal again to forge forward with those relationships. And so I think what we're going to have to do is step a little bit outside of the fundraising rules that we've all known to follow up until this point. We are all stuck at home, or many of us stuck at home. And so I think we're going to have to start developing new rules and becoming a little bit more flexible. So what that may mean is a relationship that you may prefer to start with a board member calling a business and then setting up a meeting for you. What that may look like instead is a board member still reaching out to that same business person who they know, but that may mean setting up a Zoom meeting. And so that may have to be your first contact. I definitely think communication is going to be key to this. I know Soundscapes has already been we have sent out a couple messages already to our sponsors just to let them know, to our supporters, we want you to know what's going on. We're rolling out an online programming. First it was, hey, we've got an idea phase. We just want to let you know it's in process. We're doing it as quickly as we can. One went out yesterday that said, hey, we've put this together within a week and we're excited about it and we're ready to launch and we can't wait to share more. So, I mean, I think keeping those donors that you already have relationships with, keep them informed of your process. Yes, by the way, there was a piece of that message that said, yes, we're excited, we're doing this, we're launching it, here it goes. And if you want to make sure that this happens and we keep providing music for our students, here's the donate button to make sure that that continues to happen, because we need you right now to make this happen. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. I think, we have a big one, and I know we could have like 5 more webinars about this one, but we have Deborah who has asked if there's just any advice for a new development manager who may not yet have the connections with their donor base. So I guess kind of piggybacking on what Carol and Anne were talking about. So when you're a new organization or new in your position and you don't have those emails yet, and also what Sarah was saying, how do you make those connections? Is there, using your board is of course a first great resource. What are some other ways that you would recommend? I mean, if we had to turn this into like selling your program or sales for the new fundraising professional, what would you recommend, especially in this particular social and economic climate?
I mean, I think it's kind of a time to kind of go back to basics of how do you do your prospecting and relationship building. And so like with any kind of networking experience, you start with who you know and how your relationship is with them. And then just keep building it outwards from there. I think what's really unique about this and like I mentioned, it was kind of it was sort of similar in the recession in 2008, is that people are really curious how things are going. So you have a really easy reason to reach out and talk to people about what's going on with your program and how are you doing lessons and instruction virtually, and what are going to be the next steps. I think people really want to hear about that. I mean, it's almost like I would rather hear that kind of news than the actual like medical report news. This would be so much more compelling and interesting for how I spend my time. So don't be shy about by doing some cold calls and saying like, hey, so-and-so told me that I should call you because I think you'd be really interested in this. And also as the development manager, you should be doing this. So I think donors are smart enough to know, like, if the development manager is calling me, it's like, that's part of their job. They're supposed to call me. So don't be shy about it from that perspective either. But like Carol was saying, and others have said today, it's just always starting with who do you know, and then just building it outwards from there and relying on the relationships as the starting point.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kind of along, maybe even a more basic question than that. We have a question from Marianne that she says, we have board members who are hesitant of being intrusive at this time and paused their requests for donations. Do you have any language to support communications to those board members?
Yeah,
I'll jump in here. Oh, sorry, Carol. I'd love to hear from you. The El Sistema USA board, I think, is a really interesting example in that it's a number of program representatives from across the country. And so not every board member in El Sistema USA is going to be my strong arm fundraiser. But what I am doing is not relying on a massive board message. And instead, I have an individual conversation with each of those board members about how they can help El Sistema USA at this time. That would be my advice, is you let the board know in a mass email that you'll be reaching out to them individually to talk to them about how they can help during this time. Carol, sorry.
no, sure, that's fine. No, I was just going to say that I understand your board's hesitation, but I think you need to have a conversation with them that there are ways to do this that are thoughtful and acknowledge the position that a lot of people are in. I mentioned the email that we sent out yesterday where we did ask for money, but we acknowledged in that ask that many of you are also being impacted financially, just like we are at Soundscapes. We know that you are, but if you are in the position to give, we need you now more than ever.
I think that's really great. I mean, that's absolutely spot on. I would add one more thing, which is that there's a way, because your board has a fiduciary responsibility to your organization to help you raise the funds. Go with the people who are already willing to help you make those asks, and then share their successes with the rest of the board and make it, and like tell that story of how they're doing it effectively, so that other board members might feel a little bit of that peer pressure from, if my other board members are doing it and they're having success, maybe I can do it too. Something that might be a little bit of like an instigator for them.
This is a huge topic of conversation in the chat right now. Sarah also dove in with, how do we speak with our board who may want to cut staff or may want to cut funding to various places where we in our programs feel that it's essential that those things not be cut? How do we get them thinking in other directions with what Sarah calls an abundance mindset?
I feel like I'm jumping in a lot. So Katie and Carol and Hannah, definitely speak over me if I'm taking up too much airtime. One thing that comes to mind is thinking about how this isn't going to be forever. We will eventually turn a corner on it. And you might have to contract your finances right now. But that does mean that you have to do it in a way that's going to set you up to be able to grow out of that later. So there's that expression of like, are you cutting through the bone? Or are you just cutting off the fat? So like, if you're going to be cutting expenses, and if you're in a position where you actually have to make those horrible decisions to cut those expenses and possibly reduce staff, are you setting yourself up to be able to grow when the opportunity comes later?
Yeah, one of the
I
things,
wanted to just
go ahead.
Go ahead, Carol. Sorry.
Well, one of the things that we did at Soundscapes to make sure that our board had the information they need so that they were reacting not from a place of fear, but I wanted them to know that, yes, this is going to impact our fundraising. I actually went through each aspect of our fundraising and developed a report that I gave to the board, but actually, and it wasn't even the full board. We have kind of a board task force that's helping us because we need to be able to move very quickly on everything right now. So we have a board task force, and we got together for a meeting last week, and I provided a report for them. And I said, okay, here is in detail what I think the short-term impact of this is going to be. And yes, there may be a budget shortfall this year, and here's what I think it may be and why. This event is going to be impacted. I think this grant may not go through the way we expected, so specifics. But I also gave them a long-term outlook and said, okay, this is the impact on each aspect. Short-term, this is what I predict long-term. And I will say I was fundraising through the last recession, and so, I mean, I had an idea of, this was not just blind predictions, this was having seen something similar. But having gone through that before, I suspect that some foundations may stop funding or significantly reduce their funding. The priorities for some foundations may change. You're going to see a flood of funding going toward health research, and some of that may come away from the arts. So giving them both the short-term, more immediate challenges that we may face, but also long-term. But the reason I did that was so that instead of just saying, gosh, this program can't make it, and throwing up their hands and throwing in the towel, it gave them realistic ideas of, here's what the impact really may be. Okay, now we can make decisions, not from a place of fear, but from a place of realistic expectations.
Carol, you said a lot about grants in there, and I know that's something that in the title of our webinar today, we talked about addressing grants as well. Mike, would you be willing to address the Angel Foundation's response to this, and thoughts on current funds that are out there, things that have been pledged, and also perhaps future capacity?
I believe Mike left the meeting. I thought I saw his name go across.
Oh,
Too fast.
Can I add something? Jessica, may I add something?
yes.
Please.
This is Ann Henry. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Soundscapes, and I had to join the meeting a little late. I was having some technical difficulties. But one thing, don't forget that there are resources from the government, such as small business agency loans, or even the small business agency disaster loans, depending on whether your state has been approved for those. You can apply for those loans at a very low interest rate, and typically a percentage of it is forgiven. So you could apply for a loan, and don't quote me on this, but this is what I understand. You can apply for a loan and only accept the forgiven amount. So you would then come away with some funding without having to spend anything for it. But that's, again, there are a lot of nuances to that kind of government relief, and I'm just beginning to look into it. But don't forget that there are resources like that out there.
Thanks, Anne. That's a good thing to know about. Does anyone else have specific information from grant funders, government funding, private grant
Jessica, I can. This is Sarah again. Right now, about 75% of our budget is grants. And so obviously this has been a very scary thing, but they have been in contact with me and basically been saying, like, you can suspend it, you can extend it, and we don't want to necessarily take the money back from you. So tell us what you're going to do with it. And I think as long as you're giving them a plan into how you're spending the money, and whether, for example, we're not going to have our showcase in the way we had planned unless something changes in the next 2 weeks, mid-May. The fact that your outcomes of bringing the children together for a performance in a virtual way, or that your outcomes might change, but showing them what that is and how that's going to be, and why things like teaching staff still need to be funded, and helping them explain, like, if you take this $10,000 or $25,000 grant away from us, these are going to be implications. And Minnesota's very arts philanthropic, and so they're like, oh, we don't want to cut artists. So then they can go to their higher ups or their foundation boards and say, you know, communication as a plan, we don't want to take this away from them. Are you okay with this plan? And so far, it sounds like they've been really willing to work with us, even though they haven't given us the final approval. I feel pretty good that our grant funding isn't going to be impacted. Thank God.
Hello, one more time. Another thing that we are doing, and this may be something that anybody in any state can go to their Arts Council. For Virginia, it's the Virginia Commission for the Arts. We have a grant from them this year and have had for a number of years. And typically they withhold maybe 15 or 20% of that gift until the end of the year when you've submitted your final report. And they have released that reserved now, and they're going to give it to the grantees as soon as possible. We still have to do the report, but they are releasing the funds now. And there may be some emergency relief funds in, you know, just that they have on hand for artists in your state. Again, it's something to look into.
Health System USA has shared in our links a bunch of information and links to emergency relief funds, kind of state by state. So be sure to check out those links on our COVID-19 page. I also just wanted to share my conversation with Mike Angel about foundation giving for this fiscal year. So he explained to me that most foundations, when they're making gifts, making awards in any fiscal year, they actually have to release the funds or somehow untie their funds if they're connected to the stock market in any way into a separate account in order to be able to then make gifts from those funds so that those funds don't lose value in the fiscal year that they are making the award. So generally for foundation giving, if you're receiving a gift or an award in this fiscal year, so through June 30th, it should be awarded to you in full. I anticipate that foundation funding is really going to change, as Carol pointed out, into the future. I have to say I'm really excited to see so many people interested in fundraising and in continuing the conversation about fundraising. I have always found fundraising a somewhat joyous activity, and it's a way to invite people to your party and talk about all the great things that are going on and get them involved in your work. We'll be publishing everything, so we'll be publishing the slides. The slides are available publicly. And we'll be publishing our toolkit. Anne and Hannah, we've had a lot of questions about being able to reach out to you to ask questions for people who are planning their events for the rest of this semester. I'll be in touch with you both, and maybe we can talk about the best way to do that, to either directly connect you, or maybe we can prepare a little something from our conversation today that we can share out with everyone. You let me know what you think.
That sounds great.
Before
Be in touch.
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, we sure do.
I am curious to know what people have encountered in terms of gifts from donors who are giving directly from their IRAs, which are typically in stock, and that's probably hugely impacted at this point. How do you approach someone who is typically given you a fairly large gift, but in stock? No,
I mean,
no one's done
I
that
still
yet.
plan to ask. They can always say no, but you know me, I'm not afraid to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Carol. You still have to ask. And then I think the communication is always, we really want you to do as best you can for us. And, knowing that your circumstances may have changed, let's just be honest. Like, we still really value you as a donor, and, we hope that you'll do the best that you can for us, and just be grateful and steward that donor and cultivate the relationship. Keep them close. Eventually things will turn around, and you want them in a position to give you a really nice big gift when that time comes.
I just remembered an important point, which is I know most of us are working in accruals-based accounting. Don't forget about the power of pledges. You can put pledges towards your balance sheet, and that can buy you some time. Obviously, it's not cash in hand, but remember, the stock market is down now. Could you, if you're not able to send that award today or this month, could you make that pledge for next year? Could you increase it since you're not going to be able to make that cash gift now? Nice. Thanks, Marianne.
Okay, I think now may be a good time to wrap this up. I hope that everybody has gotten some fabulous ideas. If you have additional questions, keep reaching out. The website is there. We'll be sure to get all the materials from this meeting to each of you. The other thing I'd like to point out is that there is an El Sistema USA Facebook group. Katie, is that a private group?
It is.
Okay, so if you would like to be invited to that group and you haven't seen it before, just send a quick chat message here before the end of the meeting and we'll make sure that you are invited to join. So is that all? Are we ready to wrap up?
Thank you. I think
Okay.
so. Thank you so much to Jessica, to Anne, to Carol for curating this conversation. Thank you to Ann Welch and to Hannah Gruby from the Laundry School of Music at Bard College. Thank you all for all of your questions. We will definitely be following up on this topic as the weeks unfold in front of us. And just as a reminder, these are Third Friday forums, which are designing really open conversations around what's going on in our program. Be sure to look at our other working groups. They include programming for high school students, equity-centered pedagogy, which I think will be a really interesting conversation, particularly in thinking about how to make sure we're providing equitable teaching resources to all of our kids in an environment that's totally based on technology. And then the final group is public school partnerships, how you're communicating with your public school partners. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll have a recording and the notes to this meeting will be posted and shared with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.